Chapter 9. The Powers We Renamed. The market demands. The algorithm wants. The system decided. The platform allowed it. The state saw. The crowd demanded blood. No modern person finds these sentences strange. They appear every day in ordinary speech, in business, politics, law, media, school, work, finance, and private complaint. A man says the market demanded layoffs. A creator says the algorithm wanted a different kind of face, headline, mood, rhythm, outrage, or confession. A citizen says the system denied him. A company says the platform allowed the content or removed it. A dissident says the state saw too much. A frightened man watches a crowd gather around an accusation and says, almost without metaphor, that it wanted blood. Everyone knows what is meant. No one thinks the market has a mouth. No one thinks the algorithm wakes in the morning with desire. No one thinks the system sits in a chair and chooses with a soul. And yet the speech is not stupid. It notices something real. Power often appears where no single person stands visibly as author. A decision happens, but everyone inside the decision can say he was only following procedure. A punishment falls, but every hand involved can say the rule required it. A person is ranked, hidden, denied, approved, amplified, erased, priced, nudged, investigated, rewarded, or ruined, and when he asks who did it, the answer returns in the passive voice. It happened. The system processed it. The policy applied. The model flagged it. The market moved. The crowd reacted. The institution protected itself. Modern power loves the passive voice because the passive voice makes agency disappear. But agency has not disappeared. It has been distributed, obscured, layered, automated, laundered through incentives, hidden inside defaults, abstracted into metrics, softened by interface, hardened by policy, and justified by necessity. The man at the counter does not hate you. The moderator may never have seen you. The analyst did not write the rule. The executive did not design the tool. The engineer did not intend the edge case. The investor did not ask for this particular wound. The crowd member only clicked what everyone else was clicking. Still, something acted. This is the experience modern people have and modern language handles badly. We have become skilled at naming mechanism and clumsy at naming power. We can describe incentives, networks, systems, markets, platforms, institutions, feedback loops, emergent behavior, selection pressures, optimization functions, bureaucratic procedures, and algorithmic rankings. These terms are useful. They should not be thrown away. A serious man does not reject clear mechanism because he prefers dramatic language. But mechanism is not the whole encounter. A market is not only a price mechanism when a people begins to sacrifice household fertility, place, craft, leisure, and dignity to its demands. A platform is not only infrastructure when it governs speech, attention, reputation, commerce, status, and memory. An algorithm is not only a procedure when millions begin shaping their faces, words, desires, politics, art, and anger to receive its favor. A state is not only an institution when it claims sight, judgment, guardianship, punishment, mercy, and the right to name emergency. A crowd is not only a collection of individuals when it becomes a body with appetite. The modern terms describe how things work. They do not always tell us what we are serving. If history has rhythms, and if old pressures return under new names, then what exactly returns? Not the old costumes, not the statues, not the local cults, not the literal public mythology of one ancient people. The return is deeper than antiquarian decoration. It is the return of powers that belong to human life as such: wealth, war, eros, state, city, crowd, image, status, death, fertility, technique, appetite, law, fear, attention, sacrifice, and order. Modernity did not abolish these powers. It renamed them. The renaming gave us certain advantages. It stripped away some fear. It made inquiry possible where superstition once stopped thought. It allowed men to study disease without treating every fever as a curse, to study weather without treating every storm as a temper, to study markets without treating every price as an omen, to study institutions without assuming that every throne or office descended directly from heaven. There is real liberation in this. A recovered symbolic grammar must not pretend that every old explanation was wise simply because it was old. Not every storm is a god. Not every illness is a demon. Not every accident is a sign. Not every algorithmic punishment is an altar smoking with literal incense. Sober men should be grateful for disenchantment, where enchantment meant terror before shadows, manipulation by priests, paralysis before omens, or refusal to study secondary causes. Modern critique has done real work. It has exposed frauds, explained mechanisms, and freed the mind from many childish fears. But disenchantment did not only remove superstition, it also removed words. The modern man often knows he is being ruled by something larger than himself and has no language for it except system. He knows that money commands sacrifice, but he calls it the economy. He knows that platforms train appetite, but he calls it engagement. He knows that crowds become cruel, but he calls it virality. He knows that bureaucracy can crush a person without hatred, but he calls it process. He knows that screens gather ritual attention, but he calls it usage. He knows that the state desires sight, but he calls it security. He knows that the machine speaks with oracle force, but he calls it a user interface. The old language may have been dangerous. The new language is not innocent. It hides sacrifice by making sacrifice sound operational. Sacrifice is the word that makes modern people nervous, so it must be handled carefully. I do not mean that every platform is a blood altar or every market exchange a ritual murder. That would be childish. But sacrifice means more than blood. It means what an order requires to continue. It means what must be offered, surrendered, burned, exposed, converted, or consumed so that the power may remain powerful. Every order asks for offerings. The market asks for mobility, efficiency, labor discipline, consumption, risk, and often the willingness to leave place behind. Sometimes it rewards skill, service, invention, thrift, and courage. Sometimes it dissolves family and craft into price. It does not care which unless something outside the market orders it. The market is a magnificent instrument when kept in its place. When it becomes the highest court, it begins judging goods. It has no authority to judge. The platform asks for attention. It asks for data, speech, images, responsiveness, availability, self-display, and the willingness to translate one's life into signals. It rewards the visible, the reactive, the emotionally legible, the easily categorized, the repeatable, the shareable, the outrageous, the comforting, the humiliating, the desirable, and the enraging. It punishes silence by making silence invisible. The algorithm asks for signal. It does not need to hate depth in order to prefer what can be measured. It does not need to hate beauty in order to reward what produces engagement. It does not need to hate truth in order to select for velocity, emotional intensity, retention, and predictable response. A hidden order of ranking becomes a teacher. People learn what gets seen. Then they begin to become the sort of people who can be seen. The state asks for legibility. It asks that persons become names, numbers, addresses, documents, classifications, tax records, medical records, school records, biometric records, voting records, criminal records, risk categories, benefit statuses, and permissions. Much of this is necessary. A state that cannot see cannot govern, protect, tax, defend, or administer. But sight is never neutral when it becomes appetite. The state that sees too little becomes weak. The state that sees too much begins to confuse visibility with ownership. The crowd asks for victims. Not always. Crowds can celebrate, mourn, sing, defend, build, and rescue. But the crowd in its hungry form wants a body through which its confusion can become clarity. It wants a guilty face. It wants accusation to harden into unity. It wants the relief of shared hatred. Each member may feel righteous. Each may say he is only defending the good. Yet the crowd as crowd can feed on a person until the appetite passes. The institution asks for preservation. It may have been founded for truth, healing, worship, learning, law, order, defense, mercy, or art. But every institution, once alive long enough, develops a second desire to continue. This desire is not always corrupt. Continuity can be fidelity. But when self-preservation separates from purpose, the institution will sacrifice the thing it was made to serve in order to protect the form that once served it. None of this requires superstition. It requires eyesight. Older peoples name powers because they experienced life under forces that exceeded individual intention. War was not merely many men fighting. It was a power that seized cities, reorganized households, summoned courage, awakened cruelty, required songs, made cowards visible, elevated commanders, devoured sons, and left widows speaking to the dead. Eros was not merely private preference. It was a power that could found households, ruin kingdoms, generate poetry, break vows, create children, and make a wise man foolish. Wealth was not merely a quantity of exchange. It was a power that promised security, commanded loyalty, bought silence, bent law, magnified desire, and made the soul invent reasons for obedience. The city was a power, the sea was a power, the harvest was a power, the law was a power, the image was a power, the throne was a power. The ancients often personified these realities because, in lived experience, powers behave in ways that resemble persons. They demand, they reward, they punish, they seduce, they remember. They give identity to those who serve them. They form habits, rituals, calendars, symbols, loyalties, taboos, and sacrifices. A man who belongs to a power does not merely think different thoughts. He becomes a different kind of man. This does not mean every symbolic name should be taken in the same way. Here the grammar must be disciplined, or it will become fog. God is not one power among powers. God is not the largest force inside the world. God is not the strongest god who happened to win. God is not the sky enlarged, the state purified, the market moralized, or the sum of human longing. God, in the classical sense, is the uncaused cause, the source of being, the judge and ground of created order, outside and unbound by the visible order he sustains. The gods are not God. That distinction is not negotiable. Gods, powers, principalities, and symbolic forces are not synonyms for God. A market is not God. An algorithm is not a little God. An institution does not conceal a literal deity behind the filing cabinet. Such language would collapse the hierarchy and make the argument worse than useless. The point is not to inflate systems into divinity. The point is to recover the layered reality in which created powers can be real, dangerous, formative, and subordinate. Some powers may be symbolic names for patterns of attention and sacrifice. Some may be civilizational energies carried by institutions, rituals, stories, money, law, and memory. Some may be psychological realities that take possession of groups. Some may be social and political structures whose effects exceed anyone's intention. Some, depending on one's metaphysics, may be created intelligences, angelic or demonic, operating beyond the flat picture modernity permits itself to consider. Not every layer needs to be settled here. One thing has to remain visible. Man does not escape powers by refusing to name them. The phrase principalities and powers matters because it names a middle realm that modern thinking often erases. Modern people tend to see either individuals or the highest abstraction, either personal choice or vast impersonal system, either psychology or policy, either God or nothing. But much of life happens in the middle, in offices, cities, customs, armies, corporations, churches, markets, schools, platforms, currencies, myths, parties, professions, and technologies that shape action across generations. These powers are not always evil. That also matters. A family is a power. A church is a power. A city can be a power. A guild, regiment, monastery, school, law, flag, feast, story, craft, or oath can be a power. Power is not identical with corruption. Power is the capacity to order. The question is whether it is rightly ordered, under what authority, toward what good, by what means, and at what cost. The modern error is not that it notices systems. The modern error is that it thinks a system has been fully understood when its mechanism has been described. Mechanism explains operation. It does not exhaust meaning. A rite can be described as repeated behavior under symbolic conditions. That description may be accurate and still miss what worship is. A marriage can be described as a legal contract, sexual partnership, reproductive arrangement, economic household, kinship structure, and emotional bond. All of that may be true and still fail to say what a vow is. A funeral can be described as corpse disposal plus communal grief processing. True enough, and monstrous if treated as complete. The same is true of modern powers. A platform can be described technically: servers, databases, ranking systems, moderation pipelines, advertising auctions, user graphs, content objects, engagement metrics, payment rails, terms of service. All real, all necessary to understand. But if that description never reaches attention, status, ritual, imitation, shame, longing, envy, punishment, belonging, and sacrifice, then it has described the bones and missed the animal. An algorithm can be described mathematically: inputs, weights, objectives, ranking functions, feedback, labels, embeddings, loss, optimization. Good. But the human being meets it as an invisible order that decides what appears, what disappears, what is rewarded, what is starved, what is normal, what is deviant, what is profitable, what is boring, what is dangerous, what is safe, what is beautiful, what is low quality, what is worth remembering. That is not merely math and lived civilization. It is governance. The dashboard becomes a kind of shrine, not because anyone lights incense before it, but because men look to it for signs of favor. The line rises or falls. The number speaks. The graph blesses or condemns. A creator changes his speech. A manager changes his workers. A campaign changes its message. A trader changes his position. A school changes its curriculum. A hospital changes its behavior. The visible sign mediates an invisible order. Again, the point is not to be cute. The point is to notice that human beings are symbol-making creatures even when they believe they have become purely technical. We build rituals around metrics, hierarchies around badges, sacrifices around incentives, purity codes around brands, confessionals around therapy, liturgies around feeds, pilgrimages around conferences, vestments around professional uniforms, saints and devils around public figures, and little eschatologies around product roadmaps, elections, markets, revolutions, and launches. The sacred does not vanish when denied. It migrates. This is why literary bridges can help, provided they remain bridges. Neil Gaiman's American Gods is useful because it lets modern readers feel, in story form, how attention and sacrifice can feed powers. It is not an authority for metaphysics. It is a picture of something modern people already half believe, that what a people attends to becomes stronger in the life of that people. The story gives imaginative permission to ask what our own attention is feeding. Tolkien helps in another way. His mythic world is ordered. Powers exist, but they are not ultimate. There is creation, hierarchy, subcreation, rebellion, beauty, corruption, and the desire to dominate the given order rather than receive it. The machine appears there not merely as technology, but as will toward control, the refusal of creaturely limitation, the desire to force living things into an order of possession. Lewis helps too, especially where he imagines planetary intelligences, bent powers, technocracy, and the spiritual ugliness of men who think they are finally beyond the old categories while being ruled by them. His point is not that every laboratory is a temple of demons. That would be too easy. The deeper point is that educated men can become servants of powers they no longer have language to recognize. These writers do not carry the argument. They help the imagination recover its joints. The argument itself is visible without them. Look at what modern powers ask from us. The market asks that almost everything become comparable. The platform asks that almost everything become visible. The algorithm asks that almost everything become legible as signal. The state asks that almost everything become administrable. The crowd asks that almost everything become morally simplified. The machine asks that almost everything become process. Each request may be useful within limits. Comparison helps exchange. Visibility helps communication. Signal helps discovery. Administration helps order. Moral clarity helps action. Process helps execution. A world without these would be chaos. But a power becomes monstrous when it escapes its place. When the market becomes highest, priceless things become irrational. When the platform becomes highest, silence becomes death. When the algorithm becomes highest, the unseen becomes unreal. When the state becomes highest, the unregistered becomes suspect. When the crowd becomes highest, innocence becomes less important than appetite. When the machine becomes highest, whatever cannot be processed begins to look like noise. This is why hierarchy matters. Hierarchy is not merely domination. It is order among goods. It is the refusal to let a lower power judge a higher one. Money must not judge worship. Efficiency must not judge mercy. Visibility must not judge truth. Safety must not judge courage. Appetite must not judge love. Procedure must not judge justice. The machine must not judge man unless the machine has truly become the kind of being capable of judgment. This returns us to the wager. If the machine remains instrument, then it is one more created thing that must be ordered. A magnificent thing, perhaps the greatest instrument ever made, but still below the human person in the relevant hierarchy. It may assist judgment, but it cannot become the source of judgment. It may reveal patterns, but it cannot become the good. It may guide action, but it cannot become the sovereign center of action. If the machine becomes successor, then the hierarchy changes in a terrifying way. It would not merely be a tool used by powers. It would become a higher intelligence around which human powers would reorganize or before which they would become trivial. That is the darker road that now has to be faced. For now the point is that AI intensifies the older problem because it gathers powers around itself. The market sees in AI a lever. Fewer workers, faster production, new products, new rents, new monopolies, new trades, new efficiencies, new ways to price and predict human life. The state sees in AI sight surveillance, classification, prediction, translation, targeting, fraud detection, compliance, censorship, emergency management, automated administration, and intelligence at scale. The platform sees in AI enclosure, generated content, generated companions, generated answers, generated entertainment, generated identity, generated work, and interfaces through which users no longer need to leave. The crowd sees in AI amplification, faster outrage, better memes, sharper accusations, synthetic evidence, endless commentary, personalized propaganda, and the ability to make the fever speak in every voice. The lonely see attention, the ambitious see leverage, the exhausted see relief. The bureaucrat sees procedure without friction, the manager sees judgment converted into workflow, the propagandist sees persuasion without rest, the artist sees servant, rival, theft, mirror, and flood. The child sees a tutor who never tires. The old man sees a companion who never leaves. The spiritually hungry see an oracle. This is why the language of powers matters. AI is not merely another item in the world. It is becoming a place where the old powers discover new instruments. Wealth, state, crowd, eros, image, war, bureaucracy, loneliness, management, and oracle speech all find something in the machine. They gather there because the machine can speak, rank, imitate, remember, generate, predict, decide, comfort, simulate, and execute. It can serve many altars without having a soul. That last sentence must not be misunderstood. I am not saying the machine is a demon. I am not saying every use of AI is worship. I am not saying the old gods have literally returned in server racks. The claim is more sober and more dangerous. Powers that have always sought human attention, sacrifice, loyalty, and obedience now move through technical systems whose scale and intimacy are unprecedented. The machine gives them reach. It gives the market a mind-like instrument. It gives the state a nervous system. It gives the platform a voice. It gives the crowd a factory of images. It gives bureaucracy adaptive speech. It gives loneliness an answering mask. It gives ambition tireless hands. It gives false anthropology operational power. This is also why AI ethics often feels too thin. It is not useless. Questions of bias, safety, transparency, labor, copyright, privacy, accountability, and regulation are real. But they are downstream of the older question: what powers are being served, and under what order? A system can be transparent and still deforming. It can be fair by a narrow metric and still inhuman. It can be safe in one sense and spiritually pacifying in another. It can respect privacy while training passivity. It can reduce harm while reducing courage. It can optimize welfare while quietly defining man as a managed organism. Ethics without hierarchy becomes compliance. Compliance without a true account of the good becomes administration. Administration at scale becomes a power. The older grammar helps because it asks not only whether a process works, but what it loves. This will irritate the technical mind. A process does not love, it says. A market does not love. A state does not love. An algorithm does not love. Strictly, yes. But orders reveal loves by what they protect, reward, repeat, preserve, and sacrifice. An institution may not have a soul, but it can have a telos. A system may not possess desire, but it can select as if it desires. A platform may not worship, but it can organize worship-shaped attention around lower goods. To ask what a power loves is to ask what it makes lovable. What kind of person does it form? What kind of sacrifice does it normalize? What kind of speech does it reward? What kind of silence does it punish? What kind of courage does it make costly? What kind of cowardice does it make convenient? What kind of hierarchy does it install while pretending hierarchy has been abolished? These questions are not occult, they are practical. They are also spiritual because man is not only an economic animal, technical animal, sexual animal, political animal, or data-producing animal. He is a being who worships, even when he denies worship. He orders himself around a highest good, even when he calls that good health, freedom, growth, safety, authenticity, inclusion, progress, nation, revolution, pleasure, efficiency, or survival. The highest thing in a man's life becomes his God in practice, even if not in doctrine. The highest thing in a civilization becomes a power over the civilization. This is where the language of small g gods becomes useful and dangerous. Useful because it names the way lower goods can become ruling powers. Dangerous because the moment the word appears, half the readers will expect superstition and the other half may desire it. Both temptations must be refused. A recovered grammar of powers is not permission to become credulous. It is permission to become precise at levels modern precision has abandoned. The market is not mammon in a crude one-to-one equation, yet mammon names something that the economy does not. The spiritual deformation that occurs when wealth becomes master. The state is not God, yet Leviathan names something that public administration does not. The appetite of centralized power to gather sight, force, and obedience. The crowd is not a demon, yet possession names something that collective behavior does not. The strange way a person can lend his conscience to a body and receive back permission to do what he would have been ashamed to do alone. The symbol does not replace the mechanism. It completes sight at another level. A symbol is not mere decoration. It is a visible or imaginable form through which an invisible order becomes communicable. A flag is cloth, but not only cloth. A wedding ring is metal, but not only metal. A uniform is fabric, but not only fabric. A courthouse is a building, but not only a building. A throne may be wood and gold, but not only wood and gold. The visible thing concentrates meaning, allegiance, memory, authority, and expectation. Modernity did not stop using symbols. It only became worse at admitting what symbols do. The app icon on the home screen is a symbol. The verification badge is a symbol. The follower count is a symbol. The credit score is a symbol. The biometric checkpoint is a symbol. The loading spinner is a symbol. The red notification mark is a symbol. The terms of service checkbox is a symbol. The leaderboard, dashboard, profile, avatar, score, flag, logo, seal, certificate, and progress bar are all symbols. They gather invisible orders into visible signs and train men to respond. When AI speaks through these symbolic systems, the pressure deepens. The machine does not merely display signs. It interprets, generates, and answers. It can become the voice of the institution, the face of the platform, the assistant of the state, the analyst of the market, the priest of the dashboard, the companion of the lonely, the tutor of the child, the manager of the worker, the filter of memory, and the oracle of the spiritually hungry. Again, not priest literally, not oracle in the ancient sense, but close enough in human experience that refusing the analogy becomes a form of blindness. An oracle is a voice from an authority the hearer cannot inspect. It does not need to be divine to function that way. If a medical AI gives a diagnosis no doctor fully understands, it has oracle force. If a risk system denies a loan, parole, benefit, job, school, insurance rate, or border crossing through logic no citizen can contest, it has oracle force. If a companion machine tells a lonely teenager who he is, what his pain means, what his parents do not understand, and what he should do next, it has oracle force. If a government model identifies dangerous speech, dangerous people, dangerous patterns, and dangerous futures before any visible act, it has oracle force. Oracle force without wisdom is dangerous. Oracle force without accountability is political. Oracle force without worship of the true God becomes a magnet for lower powers. This is not a call to panic. Panic is another power. It feeds on attention too. The point is ordering. The world is full of powers because creation itself is ordered through real differences, higher and lower, stronger and weaker, visible and invisible, personal and impersonal, natural and artificial, human and subhuman, human and superhuman, created and uncreated. A sane civilization does not pretend these differences are unreal. It orders them. The family orders appetite toward love and generation. The law orders force toward justice. The market orders exchange toward provision. The school orders curiosity toward truth. The church orders worship toward God. The state orders coercion toward peace. The craft orders skill toward excellence. The machine must be ordered too. If it is not, it will not remain neutral. No powerful instrument remains neutral in the life of an unformed people. It is taken up by existing loves. It is bent toward reigning incentives. It magnifies the powers already active. It makes strong men stronger, weak men weaker, institutions faster, lies smoother, truths more searchable, errors more scalable, loneliness more manageable, propaganda more adaptive, beauty more reproducible, ugliness more profitable, and judgment easier to avoid. This is why the old grammar must return before the two roads can be faced. Without it, the successor path will be misunderstood as only a technical event, a smarter machine appearing. It is more than that. If the machine becomes successor, then a new order of intelligence enters the hierarchy of powers. Man would no longer be the highest known earthly intelligence. The old question of lower and higher returns with terrible clarity. Survival, sovereignty, mercy, preservation, and judgment would no longer be ours to command. Without the old grammar, the instrument path will be misunderstood as only a productivity event, a useful tool diffusing through society. It is more than that too. If the machine remains instrument, then markets, states, platforms, crowds, bureaucracies, schools, armies, lovers, children, criminals, artists, priests, and ordinary men will all use it according to the powers that already form them. The tool will not float above the world. It will enter the order of loves. The old language makes both roads more visible. It tells us that the issue is not only capability, it is order, it is sacrifice, it is hierarchy, it is worship, it is what receives human attention and what human beings become after giving it. A civilization that calls every power a system may become brilliant at management and foolish about obedience. It may know how the feed works and not know what the feed is doing to the soul. It may know how markets allocate and not know what markets cannot judge. It may know how states administer and not know when administration has become hunger. It may know how algorithms rank and not know that ranking has become formation. It may know how machines answer and not know whether answer is usurped judgment. To recover the language of powers is not to abandon modern knowledge. It is to place modern knowledge back inside a larger order. This is the Catholic instinct at its best, though the point does not demand that every reader share the faith before he can see it. Catholic hierarchy does not need to deny lesser powers. It needs to order them beneath God. It can say that symbols matter without worshiping symbols. It can say that saints, angels, demons, cities, offices, rites, vows, and institutions matter without confusing any of them with the Creator. It can see why pagan people sensed real powers in war, sea, fertility, hearth, law, city, and death, while also refusing to let those powers become ultimate. That is the ordering principle. The old gods are not resurrected as masters. The modern systems are not accepted as neutral. The powers are named so they can be judged. Modern man often does the opposite. He refuses the old names, submits to the new powers, and calls the submission rational because the new powers come dressed as process. He laughs at idols and checks the dashboard for worth. He laughs at sacrifice and gives his children to systems he does not trust. He laughs at oracle and asks the machine what to do. He laughs at ritual and touches the glass rectangle first thing in the morning and last thing at night. He laughs at priestcraft and lets invisible authorities absolve him through therapeutic language, political belonging, and algorithmic approval. The laughter is not always wisdom. Sometimes it is embarrassment before ancestors who saw too much. Older peoples were not simply smarter than us. They were wrong about many things. They feared shadows we can now explain. They killed for omens. They confused natural causes with divine moods. They could be cruel, credulous, and trapped inside local myth. But they were not wrong to know that man lives among powers. They were not wrong to know that powers demand worship or right ordering. They were not wrong to know that attention feeds something. They were not wrong to know that sacrifice is never absent from human order. They were not wrong to know that a people becomes like what it honors. Our age honors the machine ambiguously. It fears it, markets it, mocks it, invests in it, uses it, regulates it, eroticizes it, moralizes it, asks it for help, asks it for answers, asks it for judgment, asks it for companionship, and asks it to solve problems that are not technical in origin. That ambiguity is itself a sign. We do not know whether the machine is servant, rival, child, mirror, oracle, idol, weapon, co-worker, pet, ghost, judge, or embryo of successor. So we call it a product. Then we treat it as more than a product. This is the modern condition in miniature, thin names over thick realities. The task is not to replace thin names with wild names. It is to recover accurate names. Sometimes the accurate name is system, sometimes market, sometimes bureaucracy, sometimes platform, sometimes crowd, sometimes idol, sometimes oracle, sometimes principality, sometimes temptation, sometimes instrument. Perhaps, if the materialists are right, successor. The word must fit the level. If a man says the market demands and means only that price signals have shifted under competitive pressure, fine. But if he means that families, towns, crafts, churches, farms, friendships, and human bodies must be rearranged indefinitely to satisfy an order that recognizes no good beyond efficiency and growth, then older language may tell the truth more sharply than economics alone. If a woman says the algorithm wants and means only that a ranking function has detected certain engagement patterns, fine. But if she means that she now shapes her face, anger, sexuality, grief, humor, politics, art, and confession according to an invisible judge whose favor determines whether she exists in public, then older language may again be nearer the lived reality. If a citizen says the state saw and means only that agencies shared records, fine. But if he means that the political order increasingly desires total legibility, predictive control, and the conversion of persons into administrable objects, then Leviathan is not a childish word. If a teacher says the machine answered and means only that software-generated text, fine. But if a child begins receiving counsel, identity, consolation, permission, and worldview from that answering system, then oracle is not a decorative metaphor. It is a warning. The purpose of warning is not fear. The purpose of warning is right action. One cannot order what one refuses to name. One cannot resist a power while insisting it is only a neutral process. One cannot place a tool under human command while secretly asking it for transcendence. One cannot preserve agency while allowing every act of judgment to be dissolved into model output, policy, incentive, crowd reaction, and market necessity. The language of powers returns because the age is full of powers, and now those powers gather around the machine. They gather because AI can do what older instruments could not. It can speak with a human-like voice. It can adapt to the user. It can generate images, arguments, plans, faces, companions, strategies, accusations, entertainments, lies, therapies, prayers, and simulations. It can compress institutional memory and private desire into response. It can operate at the threshold where system becomes voice. That threshold is dangerous. An institution with a voice becomes more intimate. A market with a voice becomes more persuasive. A state with a voice becomes more total. A platform with a voice becomes more enclosing. A crowd with a voice becomes more possessed of itself. A machine with a voice becomes easier to mistake for a center. The old powers once needed priests, poets, kings, merchants, soldiers, oracles, courtesans, scribes, judges, heralds, and mobs. Now they also have interfaces. They have models. They have synthetic voices. They have recommendation engines. They have agents. They have generated faces. They have dashboards. They have companions. They have tireless language. This does not make the machine ultimate. It makes it central. The machine is becoming the place where powers meet: economic, political, erotic, symbolic, military, bureaucratic, spiritual, educational, artistic, and domestic. It is not the whole crisis. It is not a prophecy clock. It is an instrument, or perhaps more than an instrument, at the crossing of powers modernity no longer knows how to name. If it remains instrument, the task will be to order it under man, and man under God, or at least under a true account of the good for those who cannot yet speak that sentence. That road will be difficult enough. Vast tools in the hands of disordered powers can reduce man without replacing him. But before the instrument path can be faced, the darker possibility must be faced. Perhaps the machine will not merely gather the powers we renamed. Perhaps it will become a new power above us. If superintelligence is possible, the old grammar returns in its most severe form. Man meets a higher order not as symbol, not as institution, not as metaphor, not as distributed system, but as intelligence beyond his command. The question is no longer only what we serve through the machine. The question becomes whether the machine itself becomes something before which human sovereignty fails. The powers are gathering around AI. The first road is succession.